morning, all. Thank you, sir. Good morning, all. And I'll be speaking about pediatric retinal disorders and some of the less well-known aspects of pediatric retinal diseases, because the spectrum is really wide and it may not be possible to cover all the aspects. But one of the conditions that we encounter in our department, being a referral center, are pediatric choroidal neovascular membranes and how easily they are overlooked. So the etiology of pediatric choroidal neovascular membranes is very different from those of adults. We know that AMD is the most common cause, but for kids it's post-inflammatory sequelae. And the etiopathogenesis of these membranes is very different because the thickening and calcification of Brooks RP complex is not there in kids, and there is solitary ingrowth instead of multiple ingrowth sites as seen in the adults. Often these membranes spontaneously regress, but at times they need active treatment. So we looked at 111 eyes of 96 patients, and we saw that most of these kids presented when the membrane became subfoveal. So CNV can present with coexisting active choroiditis, as in this case, and the choroiditis may appear as lesions radiating from the optic disc, or after the inflammation has subsided with superficial and deep retinal hemorrhages. So these could be indicators of an underlying CNVM. It can present as peripapillary membrane with extensive subretinal hemorrhage, or a subtle green-yellow membrane at the fovea, which is picked up on fluorescein angiogram. Sometimes a wisp of hard exudate might provide a clue to the presence of CNVM, and confirmed by fluorescein. This is a case of pars planitis CNVM with VKH, and another case of VKH with active inflammation and CNVM. We also see cases of sarcoidosis with choroidal nodule and CNVM, and also may be accompanied by Candlewick's drippings with an accompanying CNVM. This is a case of sarcoid intermediate uveitis with bilateral peripapillary CNVM, here you can see, and that is confirmed on fluorescein. You could have a toxoplasma-related CNVM, and here you can see that it typically grows from the edge of the pigmented scar. And these can be well treated with anti-VEGF, and the regression is noted. So another case of toxoplasmosis-related CNVM in the left eye that was treated with combination PDT and anti-VEGF for a child that was in his teenage years. So with a long-term stability. Also in post-traumatic CNVMs, you can treat with anti-VEGF, and with one injection you can see very good regression and resolution. There's another case with multiple choroidal ruptures in a 9-year-old, injury with a wooden stick, presentation with 660. Here you can see with good resolution 4 months post bevacizumab. Another case of Best's vitelliform macular dystrophy with active CNVM in the right eye, treated with PDT, and that was reported in about 10 years back. Another case of vitreomacular dystrophy that was treated with anti-VEGF, and you can see both the modalities work. There was a recurrence 16 months, but following 2 months post ranibizumab, the vision was restored. So the emerging trend is that the Best disease, which was most common cause when we analyze our data, is now less leading cause, but trauma and inflammation are still the leading causes. So coming to the management, the spontaneous resolution is often seen, but the natural history is good, and visual improvement occurs in 32% eyes and stabilize in 48%. So children with CNV often have bilateral affection, and they come when the CNVM is subfoveal with accompanying inflammation. So pediatric uveitis, Dr. Biswas has covered well and extensively. So I'll be dealing with the medical management and the surgical management from the VR perspective. Often we are asked to collect vitreous sample or biopsy, which gives a clue to the diagnosis, and it could itself be a therapeutic because it clears the visual axis, or accompanying vitreous hemorrhage, or clears the cataractous lens, and it removes the vitreoretinal traction and helps settle the retinal detachment. And also additionally, you could have laser photocoagulation or accompanying neovascularization. So These are the kind of cases that we are asked for biopsy. Is a 2-month-old premature child with endophthalmitis, and this is a patient with GRA who also developed endogenous endophthalmitis. Often the cause is unknown, so this case we had suspected caterpillar hair intraocular, and they were detected on UBM. So this was a case who had an epiretinal membrane post chickenpox, and here you can see the active traction, and also cases of combined hematoma, some of which do well with epiretinal membrane peeling. There are cases which we have seen with obliterative vasculitis post-viral fever. This one was post-chikungunya and also panophthalmitis following dengue fever. So ophthalmomyosis is not uncommon because we are a tropical country and we see a lot. So the basic idea is to control the intraocular inflammation and start antihelminthic treatment. And often we see this cysticercosis in the vitreous cavity or in the subretinal space, and these have to be surgically managed. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So we had a large series which showed that two approaches we can have two approaches. One is transscleral and the other one is transvitreal, and both are effective depending upon the situation. And often these worms can present like endophthalmitis-like picture. Sometimes they're in the anterior chamber and they have to be removed. And a lot of variability in the presentations. So again, UBM is invaluable in understanding the anatomy and localizing these worms. Important is to look for iris holes. So if you have iris holes, there's a high suspicion, and then once the worm is isolated, it has to be sent to the pathology lab for proper identification. You can also sometimes treat them with laser photocoagulation and understand the life cycle of these worms well. There can be other conditions in the fundus which can lead you to discovering a systemic condition, like this child had a sickle cell anemia, or this one who had Gold syndrome, multiple teeth, finger abnormalities. And it's important to know because sometimes these are life-threatening conditions, the Church syndrome with coloboma eyes. And here you can see optic nerve hypoplasia with septum pellucidum deficit and an optic disc maculopathy, toxocera as Dr. Biswas told, ARN, and you can do laser prophylaxis, blunt trauma, a variety of ways, avulsion of the disc, Berlin's edema, choroidal rupture. Sometimes you have to surgically displace with intraocular gas, or you can also observe it's peripheral. And if there's a normal fundus and child complains or the parent brings in the child, you should think of these 4 differentials. And further with age, you could discover hereditary dystrophies, and autofluorescence is invaluable, non-invasive imaging technique in such kids. And retinitis pigmentosa, of course, a battery of syndromes to be discovered, and workup has to be done for. Then coming to the vasculopathies, you can have Coats disease and then retinoschisis. So there's a variety of ways retinoschisis can present, and the negative waveform is to be looked for in electrophysiology. If you see the lattices are radially oriented and pigmented, you should think of Stickler syndrome. So these are the ventopathies, and these must be recognized. Coats disease, PHPV, are the causes of leukocoria to be differentiated from retinoblastoma, and Dr. Honavar will speak more about that. Important to look for telangiectasia, and some of these cases can be managed surgically. And I think we can go to the next slide for the want of time. And then we have the most importantly ROP, and we see older babies with a very different presentation as compared to the Western world, and we have APROP that we must recognize, and it's posteriorly located with plus disease, and it's very aggressive. It's difficult to distinguish between arterioles and venules, and they're direct shunts, and neovascularizations, and it may not be a staged disease that we see in a classically described ROP. So here you can see these shunts, and they can be very, very aggressive, progress within few days. And then we also see the hybrid ROP as published by the PGI group. The ridge tissue and the flat neovascularization are together seen. And some end up with stage 5. Can we go to the next slide? But even with stage 5, we have found very gratifying results. Up to 30-35% have some meaningful vision, and some of them also have reading vision, as this child. You can see thick bilateral AFK glasses, but this child is able to read big fonts. So in conclusion, retinal conditions can act as a harbinger of systemic associations. Medical surgical management is done as appropriate, and several other physicians might be involved, like internists and geneticists, and a long-term follow-up is essential. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.